in the next slide, you see the outer court of the tomb of Fani Redempta. You see the cremation burial niches. If you would look into those niches, you would see little holes, and in those holes would be the cremated remains, and there would be a lid on those. And they would often take and open up the remains and put in a little wine and a little, well, it was a libation that they would do. The idea, on inhumation burials, you would often see a hole in the top, and there would be a tube going down into the actual grave. And the idea was you would go and pour a little wine to refresh your deceased relatives. They were not thinking they were actually refreshing their deceased relatives. It was a way of honoring the dead and remembering the dead. And it was very important to them to remember and honor the dead. Okay? So this was one of the ceremonial, symbolic gestures that they would do, these little libations. Putting coins in, for example, would be another way. They would put the coins in for
the Sharon crossing the Styx.
That's right. They would give it to Sharon, who was the ferry boat, right? The ferry boat master who would take you across the river Styx to eternal life, the Elysian fields.
I live in River Styx.
Pardon?
I live in River Styx.
You live in River Styx?
Ohio.
Oh, okay.
It's a village, right?
Go ahead. Click that again. All right. Here now we see a stairway to the Vatican Hill. Now, this stairway to the Vatican Hill was added later. We're guessing it was added by Constantine's workers. Why did they do that? To give family members access to the burial right up until the day they filled it in with dirt. It was important to them, remember. Some took the ones that could, took their relatives out and buried them elsewhere. Others did not have the resources to do that and had to just leave them there. But they could go down there right up until the last minute. And also it gave Constantine's workers a chance to get down there and work. We will see, and we don't have pictures of this, but in some of the other mausolea, there are stairways that are contemporary to the mausoleum. They're actually built into the mausoleum that you very nicely done, and decorated and all that, and it would take you from the inner court out to the outer court and up the hill where you would have a picnic. They would make a day of it. When they would go to the cemetery, they would make a day of it. Remember, this was outside of town, and they didn't have cars, and they didn't have horses that they all rode and things like that. This was hoofing it. And so they would walk out there, they'd make a day of it, they'd go up to the gardens, and then they'd go home. And they would do this on occasions throughout the year.
Much like the Mexican tradition of the Day of the Dead.
Okay, and right. And we have those Memorial Day, All Souls Day. We go to the cemeteries, we clean up the tombs, the graves, and we clean up the markers and things like that. That's all part of that tradition continues on. But this goes way back then. Right, so this was, again, to give them an opportunity. The next slide, we see the tomb of Lucius Tilius Zaithus. I'm sorry, I can't talk today. Zaithus. And inside, on the floor, next, we see a magnificent black and white mosaic. Just absolutely stunning with animals and filigree and very, very ornate and very, very well preserved. Unfortunately, the slides are available aren't all that clear, but okay. We move on to the next tomb, and this is the tomb. We just simply call it Opus Reticulatum, named after the style of building stones that it has. We don't have the titulus in front of this one. We don't know who it would belong to, and so we have this Opus Reticulatum. Now, we know we can date this between 126 and 135 because of where it's built, and also because it uses carved stone instead of baked stone. So we know, again, between 126 and 135 AD. Next tomb is a fresco relief in the tomb of Aelius Tyrannus, which is the next mausoleum down, if you're following along on your card there. In this tomb of Aelius Tyrannus, next, we see, cremation burial niches there. Go ahead. I'm going to move ahead here. You see two funerary urns, alabaster, that were found. This is the way they were found. This is what one of them looks cleaned up. Next. A little different when they look at it. It's all cleaned up now. Okay. That's in the Vatican Museum. Let's move on to the next one. We see again on our card, here's where we're at. The tomb of the Kitane. Next. The Kitane is one of the largest and most ornate tombs in the necropolis, and again includes both cremation and inhumation burials. Some inhumation burials are pagan. However, there's one important one that is a Christian. Let's go ahead to the next one. And we see the tomb of Aemilia Gorgonia. Aemilia Gorgonia was 28 years, 4 months, and 28 days old, and that's right there. Okay. 28 days old, and it says, requiem or dorma in pacis. They didn't say requiem in pacis, they said dorma, sleep in peace. A Christian idea, very much a Christian idea. We know she was a Christian, and she is extolled. We see here where it says the anima dulcis Gorgonia, the sweet soul of Gorgonia, because up there we see it. You can't see it too well here, but she's drawing from a well. And that reminds us of the Samaritan woman who was drawing water from the well for Jesus, and he promised her water that would flow up within her as water of eternal life. So again, a woman drawing water from the well to the Christians was a sign of eternal life. And we know she was a Christian. Okay, next. Again, that tomb may have been added later by somebody. You can see it's very coarsely engraved. It's not professionally done. Many tombs were added close to the time, right when Constantine was going to fill it in with dirt. Christians wanted to be buried in that area. They wanted to be buried there. Okay? In the next slide, we see a beautifully preserved fresco of the tomb of the teacher. And it's called that because of the next slide, and we see the teacher. It's a teacher with a scroll sitting at the desk and his student coming up. And again, this was covered with dirt for some 1,600 years. The next slide, we see the tomb of the Herma family, the largest and most lush and richest of all of the mausolea. Again, there's an outer court with an inner vaulted mausoleum. We see the inner vaulted mausoleum. In the tomb, Marcus Aurelius is depicted as a god, which means that dates to after 180, because that's when Marcus Aurelius died. Marcus Aurelius was noted as a god only after his death. We see, go ahead to the next one. We see one of the relatives here, no name, but we just know that's one of the relatives. And the god Oceanus, the god of the ocean, is there. Outside of this tomb, go ahead to the next one, we see another Christian burial. This is the tombstone of Flavius Statilius Olympius. And it is said that he jested with everybody and argued with no one. He was a very pleasant man. And we know he was a Christian because over there, click, you see the chi rho. Okay? The Christian symbol, the chi and the rho, the first two letters of Christ that are overlaid. And that was very common for them to do, and that's going to be important to us later. They would take the chi and the rho, the X and the P for us it looks like, but it's a chi rho, and that would be a symbol for Christ. We're going to see they would do that with a lot of holy names, like M.A. for Mariam. Okay? You would see that often, even today we use that, the M with the A in the middle of it. You would see P.E., which would be a P, and I got to do it for you, a P with an E, okay, which some would say also looks like the key of Peter, but I think that's taking it a little far. I think they just meant it for Peter, P.E. together, to show him. And we see that graffiti starts getting all over the place as we get closer to field P. We see also in the tomb of the Herma, and again, we can't see it anymore, it's away, but when they removed a retaining wall, there was a painting there that said, Peter, pray for those Christians buried near your body. And we believe that was put there just before the wall was put in by Christians who buried their people right close to the tomb of St. Peter. The next one, we're just going to look real quickly at the tomb, and we'll flip one more. This is the Abduction of Pro Subpoena. Again, we don't know whose tomb this is. The next one's a little bit closer up. We see Hermes, or Mercury, the god, the fleet-footed god, the messenger god, is leading the chariot of Pluto, the god of the underworld, and in it is Proserpina, or Persephone. Her mother was Demeter, or Ceres. We get the word Syra from that. She's the goddess of the harvest. Her mother was the goddess of the harvest. We can see she was picking flowers when Pluto saw her, lusted after her, came riding up in his chariot, took her away to Hades. We see her flowers all strewn on the ground there. Big argument occurred between Demeter and Pluto, and they had to go to Zeus and say, okay, settle it. And he said, okay, half the year you're going to be with Pluto, half the year you're going to be with Demeter. So in the half of the year that Proserpina is with Pluto in the Hades, in the underworld, Demeter mourns, and we have fall and winter. And when she comes back to her mother rejoices, and we have spring and summer. So again, the seasons of the year, even for the pagans, was a sign of eternal life. Next slide, please. Okay, here's where we're moving up the road here, okay? I just want to show you where we're at. This little tomb here, this very little tomb, is what kind of got this whole thing started for us. Go ahead, next one. This is the tomb of a young child, Julius Cryonesis. Julius was not even 22 months old when he passed away. His parents bought this and built this mausoleum, and it's very unusual because they didn't build a mausoleum completely. They used the side wall of the one on one side and the side wall of the one next to it. They just put in a front wall, back wall, and roof. So they kind of cheated a little bit. Either they were pagans that sold to Christians or pagans that converted to Christianity, because originally there were pagan symbols in it, but then it just was filled with Christian symbols. Here we see a magnificent mosaic, and this is just, when you look at art books like Gardner's Art for the Ages or anything like that, you're going to see this picture. Christos, Helios, Christ the sun god. He's riding the chariot of the sun. It is magnificent. You see here the faint outline of the mosaic. This is called tesserae. This is when the mosaic tiles fall out. There's a little faint outline of what was there left in that mortar that was used for the mosaic. Now, you'll also notice there's a huge hole in the roof. The tomb was discovered in 1574 when they were building the brand new basilica. They were digging down to build foundations and things like that, and somebody fell through the roof. One far-sighted Monsignor decided, I'm going to go down and make notes about this, and he told us all about the mosaics that were in this tomb. He described it to a T. The one thing he neglected to write down is where it was. So, since 1574, we knew it was there. We just didn't know where. All right? And you've got this great big basilica. You have no idea where to look. And it's a little impractical just to start going, where is this thing? Right? Fortunately, when Pope Pius XI died, forgive the pun, when he died and they stumbled upon it, they began to look because they knew there was something there. All right? Again, this is a close-up. Next is the close-up of the Christos Helios. Again, magnificent mosaic. On the back wall, we see the fisherman. Next. And again, this is mostly in tesserae. This is all in tesserae. On the left wall is the Good Shepherd. On the right wall is Jonah and the whale. Again, all Christian symbols. The next tomb is, just real quickly, we're going to see the tomb of Trevolina, Flacilla. And this is important because, again, it gives us a little bit of help with the dating. In her cremation casket, we found a coin dating, I say we, the archaeologists found a coin dating between 316 and 317 AD. This means the coin was probably placed there between 317 and 320. Right? Work on the basilica had not yet begun, but the necropolis was still in use at that time. Christians began taking over here, but paganism was holding on. They believe this is one of the last cremation burials in Rome that they can identify. Next. Here's where we are now. Click. We're right here. Right? This is the tomb that had that little casket in it with the coin. Okay, we're going to move here next. And we're right on the other side of field P. Go ahead. Click. We see where field P is. All right. You'll notice that the necropolis is working its way up here. We're outside the city of Rome. This is locus primus. This is prime location for burial ground. This is hot property. So they're building right along here, and all of a sudden they go, oh, we're going to go around this one, and then keep going. Okay? What would make them not use that spot right there for burial monument? Because there already were burials there, and they couldn't violate that area. Okay? So there was the problem. Now, they also had another problem. Dirt began to slide. Next slide. We see that dirt began to slide down the hill. They were building another mausoleum up here, and dirt began sliding down the hill. So they had to do something. They had to do something to keep that dirt, keep access to this mausoleum. They wanted access to the mausoleum above. They didn't want all this dirt coming down. And so, next slide, they built what's called, next, there you go, next. They built this clevis, all right? But in the clevis, they built, oh, here, by the way, remember that stairway I was telling you about? Here's another one of those. You can't get to this to take a picture of it right now, but it's there. Okay, next. We see what they did. They built a wall here, and this stairwell with the clevis. Go ahead and click. There's the tropeon, or the trophy. Notice the asymmetrical opening. This is niche 2, niche 3, and niche 1's down below. Click again. We see the red wall. Again. Click. And we see the clevis here. Right? So this is where we come to. All these mausoleum are come up here. They skirt around this area here. Click next. And again, here's field B. Go ahead and click. We see the trophy, the red wall, and we're going to see that later on, go ahead, a crack developed in the red wall. So when that crack developed, they built a support wall between the red wall and that northern, this is the north pillar here. Later on, they built another wall over here just for symmetry. All right. You can actually see the south wall and the south pillar today. You can actually see that if you're on this tour of the sky. All right. You can see in the niche too today. We're going to see that. So you see that crack develop there. Next. Okay. Underneath the drainage tiles below, underneath the clevis, they found these drainage tiles to allow water, obviously, to flow from up above on the hill down below. Go ahead and click the next one. Click. One more. We're going to see that this marker right here is the stamp of a furnace or tile making factory that has the mark of Aurelius Caesar and Faustina Augusta. Again, this helps us date things. Faustina Augusta took the title of Augusta in the year 146. Marcus Aurelius took the title of Aurelius Caesar, in the year, was already Caesar Aurelius, but he became Emperor Marcus Aurelius in 161. So between 146, when Faustina became Augusta, and 161, when Aurelius Caesar became Marcus Aurelius the Emperor, that's when that was built. All right? So somewhere between 161 and 146, or 146 and 161. That's less than 100 years after that burial in field P. Okay? Go ahead, next one. Here's the way you would see the clevis today. If you were standing at the base of the clevis, you'd be looking up the stairs of the clevis. The red wall's over here. We're going to see that in a minute. You're looking up the stairs, okay? And this is that tomb that was to the left.